display served Plato's rhetorical purposes, and for us, therefore, represents insight into how fulfillment of one's vow worked. What debt did Socrates owe to the god? A debt for his cure, as it were, from life by means of imminent death? A retrospective debt for a long and healthy life? A debt owed for recovery from some previous but unrecorded ailment? Or a debt for some other reason? Why Socrates owed a debt to Asclepius remains the subject of scholarly dispute. But we, for our purposes, see in the fulfillment of the vow and the payment of the debt the structure of a vow. One is asked the god, here Asclepius, for a favor, whatever it was, which the god fulfilled. The promise consisted of an animal sacrifice, here a rooster, which was affordable even for
a rooster? Oh, wow. Roosters, chickens. It's all Greek to me. Anyway, what's up, fam? How you all doing today? We are towards the middle of ancient pagan religions with a concentration on pre-Christianity. We talked about some Hindu gods and some gods that came before Hinduism. We talked about some Greek gods. And it just keeps going and going. By the way, the audiobook that I'm reviewing comes from the Great Courses series. This particular Great Courses series is Pagan World. And it is narrated. Well, I shouldn't say narrated, but the speaker is Professor Hans Friedrich. Oh, I don't want to mess his name up. But you can find this and other books, audiobooks, Great Courses. I also did one for Ancient Egypt. I love that Ancient Egypt. That was a good series. You can also check that one out. That's also a Great Courses. Or you can just check my earlier videos. Did a whole series on that. That I did that whole entire book, ebook. So, without further ado, let's get back to the video.
person of means as modest as Socrates. Because he is about to die, Socrates asks his friend Crito to make arrangements for a proper sacrifice to Asclepius, which Socrates could otherwise have easily arranged on his own. Even in death, the pious man, here one convicted of impiety, atheism, and worshiping new gods, fulfills his traditional religious obligations. The structure of such vows, as well as prayers, is similar to a commercial contract. There is an established record of payment, or the offer of a specific payment, in exchange for which the human beings ask for a specific service. Just as one must make a contract with a legitimate owner in order to purchase property, one must identify the specific god to whom one makes payment, and from whom one asks for a benefit. The god can agree or refuse. Speculative payments in advance do not guarantee successful prayers. On the other hand, vows do not run this risk. By vowing a specific payment upon conferral of a specific benefit, one can contain costs by promising only what one can afford. And the skeptics among you may wonder, What penalties existed for those who refused to pay? The gods were their own debt collectors. The gods, according to what ancient authors frequently tell us, did not forget what was owed, and they punished those who neglected them. Agamemnon famously had to sacrifice his own daughter Iphigenia in order to appease Artemis, whom he had stiffed for a promised sacrifice. Harsh? Perhaps. The fees were also on a sliding scale, and payments could be made in other ways besides the foodstuffs that were required in sacrifice. In cities, the rich could afford better offerings, and they worked to secure divine favor through more spectacular offerings. More humble citizens offered what they could afford, and inscriptions on stone still testify to some of what they paid. An inventory from the Temple of Asclepius in Athens from the 4th century BCE tells us that Xenocrates dedicated a gold ring in a case. Dion dedicated a silver crown. Demonstrate dedicated a bronze wine jar. Nicias, a marble seashell. Other dedications include varying small amounts of money, knuckle bones, body scrapers, a key, rings, seals, jugs, shoes, a flute, a pillow. The list goes on. This sort of communication is straightforward. One can pray or make a vow for recovery from an ailment, for the health and safety of a city, crops, family members, a safe journey, victory in war. Such prayers will be answered, or perhaps not. Those who enter into commerce with the gods will be expected to pay. One may also consult the gods for advice. I've already mentioned the entrails and livers of sacrificial victims that could convey messages from the gods. One could also look for messages in nature, especially from birds. The science of bird watching was especially well developed by the Romans, and it was incorporated into the constitutional fabric of the state. But the Greeks, they too paid attention to birds. The general Xenophon, for example, who later in war. Such prayers will be answered, or perhaps not. Those who enter into commerce with the gods will be expected to pay. One may also consult the gods for advice. I've already mentioned the entrails and livers of sacrificial victims that could convey messages from the gods. One could also look for messages in nature, especially from birds. The science of bird watching was especially well developed by the Romans, and it was incorporated into the constitutional fabric of the state. But the Greeks, they too paid attention to birds.
So you're telling me that let me go. Okay, so bird watching was not so much about the beauty of the birds and how graceful they are, but it was more religious than anything else. A lot of people go bird watching and they consider themselves Christian or Hindu or some other religion. But those who bird watch, do they really understand where it all began? It was rooted in pagan philosophy that you could receive messages from the gods through certain birds. Now, when I think about that statement that he just made, I'm thinking about Noah's Ark. Some people say it was a dove. Some people say it was a raven. Does it really matter? It was a bird. He used the bird to communicate with God. God would send him back a message saying, okay, there's land this direction. Also, the pigeons were used to communicate messages back and forth. You know, you tie a note to a pigeon, send it in a certain direction, and hopefully the other person, the intended person, would get the message. Interesting. What was the other one? There was another one too. It was related to jailbirds singing like a canary. So yeah, I didn't know this is where it started, but yeah, throughout history, birds have always been synonymous with sending messages. Interesting. Very interesting.
Who later wrote his memoirs as well as history more generally, informs us that when considering whether to accept high command, he consulted the gods and received an omen that was seemingly favorable. An eagle screamed on his right. However, as Xenophon goes on to explain, the eagle was sitting down, which the soothsayer who was escorting him said was a bird for the great rather than for the ordinary person. And its appearance symbolized glory, but also hard work, for other birds attack the eagle when it is sitting. The bird also did not prophesy profit, for the eagle captures food while flying, but this one was sitting. The gods communicate via means that are readily available in nature, here an eagle, but some expert knowledge is required for correct interpretation. Armies took religious experts along. Soothsayers, haruspices, and priests were essential personnel. Such experts were available in civilian life too. In his tragedy Antigone, Sophocles represents the procedure of consulting the gods through bird watching, when he has the prophet Tiresias say, "You'll understand when you hear the signs revealed by my art. As I took my place on my old seat of augury, where all the birds regularly gather for me, I heard an unintelligible voice among them. They were screaming in dire frenzy that made their language foreign to me. I realized that they were ripping each other with their talons, murderously. The rush of their wings did not lack meaning." The place of augury was literally ornithoskopos, or birdwatch. The seer did some bird watching with a question in mind, and the behavior of the birds that appeared provided the answer. Birds can also appear unbidden, of course, and such spontaneous omens can convey warnings, as in the 12th book of the Iliad, when the appearance of an eagle helps halt the Trojan attack. For all their numbers and valor, and their eagerness to break through the wall and fight by the ships, hesitated on the brink of the trench, paralyzed by an omen. An eagle overhead that skirted their front lines from right to left, clutching in its talons a huge scarlet snake still alive and with plenty of fight left. Curling around, the snake struck at the eagle just below its neck, and in a spasm of pain, the great bird dropped it in the Trojan ranks and flew off shrieking on a blast of wind. The soldiers shuddered at the glistening coils lying in their midst, a portent from heaven. Then again, the same bird's spontaneous appearance can also provide encouragement. In the 13th book of the Iliad, when Ajax shouts abuse at the Trojan hero Hector, Homer tells us that Ajax's words were not out before a bird flew past on the right, a high-soaring eagle. The Achaeans shouted, taking heart at the omen. This process of reading bird signs is just one method of divination, or predicting the will of the gods by reading the signs they provide.
Interesting. I don't know how many of you all bird watch. I've done it occasionally. I'm not a diehard bird watcher. If I'm just outside, out and about, and I happen to see birds flying by, I might stop and just take it all in. I've seen crows, I've seen eagles, hawks. I think recently, maybe a couple months ago, I seen two birds. I think they were eagles. Could have been hawks. I'm not sure. But there were two of them, and they were soaring high in the air in the same pattern. And it occurred to me, because I seen the same pattern with just one bird previously to that. And I'm like, okay, I've seen this before. They are hunting. They got to be hunting. And what I felt was, if this were a message from up high, then it's telling me that there is a work that I need to do, and I need to gather my tools. I need to gather my strength, my energy to get this work done. I need to go hunting. I need to hunt down what I need to accomplish this task. So every time I would see these birds swinging around, flying around in a circle pattern, just repeatedly, yeah, I figured that's what it was. But it's been a long day. I had to get this video recorded, and I will be back again to discuss more of the pagan world. Be blessed. Stay safe. I'll talk to you later.